The war in the Pacific ended not with a whimper, but with a flash of light brighter than 1,000 suns.
But in the high desert plateau of New Mexico, inside the secretive confines of Los Alamos, a 6-point...
To the naked eye, it looked like a harmless piece of heavy metal, roughly the size of a bowling ball. But this was no ordinary metal.
This was the third core, the one intended for a third strike on Japan if they hadn't surrendered. With the war over, it was critical state. The scientists, many of whom had spent years racing against the Nazis to build the bomb, now turned their attention.
They called it Rufus. It was cold to the touch, yet it hummed with an invisible, lethal energy. It was a mass of subatomic tension, a collection of atoms balanced on the razor's edge of stability.
In the summer of 1945, the atmosphere at Los Alamos was a strange mix of relief and intense curiosity.
The pressure of the war was gone, replaced by the clinical coldness of post-war research.
A process the legendary Richard Feynman described as tickling the tail of a sleeping dragon.
The goal was simple but incredibly dangerous: to see how close the plutonium sphere could get to a critical state.
To do this, Daghlian began building a wall of tungsten carbide bricks around the core. These bricks acted as neutron reflectors.
Every brick added reflected more neutrons back into the core, increasing its activity. Brick by brick, the Geiger counters clicked faster. In a moment of pure, panicked instinct, Daghlian tried to pull the brick away. But it slipped. The tungsten carbide brick fell directly onto the top of the plutonium sphere. In an instant, the room was bathed in a haunting He frantically knocked the brick off the core by hand, stopping the reaction, but the damage was already done. In those few seconds, his body had absorbed a lethal dose of neutrons and gamma rays.
He walked out of the lab, but he was already a dead man walking.
First, his hands, the hands that had touched the demon core, swelled and blistered. Then came the nausea. His body was literally falling apart at the cellular level, as the radiation had shattered his DNA.
He slipped into a coma and died on September 15, 1945. He was the first American casualty of a criticality accident on home soil.
The man who took over the leadership of these tickling the dragon's tail experiments was Louis Slotin. Slotin was the polar opposite of the quiet Daghlian.
He was a daredevil, a man who had flown with the RAF during the Spanish Civil War and possessed a bravado that bordered on recklessness.
Very. He often performed these high-stakes experiments wearing blue jeans and cowboy boots.
He had performed the criticality test dozens of times, becoming so confident that he began to ignore the very safety devices designed to save his life.
The setup involved 2 half shells of beryllium, a neutron reflector, placed around the plutonium core.
To keep the core from going prompt critical and killing everyone in the room, the 2 shells had to be kept slightly apart. Safety protocol mandated the use of shims to maintain a gap. But Slotin had a faster, more intuitive method.
He had done this so many times it was muscle memory. He was the master of the dragon. Then, the screwdriver...
This action stopped the chain reaction and likely saved the lives of the 7 other men in the room.
Well, Slotin said quietly to his colleagues as the blue glow faded and the Geiger counters went off the scale, that does it.
He had absorbed over 1,000 rads of neutron and gamma radiation, more than enough to kill a man several times over.
So that the doctors could calculate exactly how much radiation each man had received.
Within hours, his left hand, the one that had gripped the beryllium shell, turned a waxy, translucent gray and began to blister.
The pain was described as unbearable, yet Slotin remained remarkably lucid for the first few days, helping his colleagues document the incident.
He called it a big blue flash. His body, however, was undergoing a catastrophic biological failure.
The radiation had effectively cooked his internal organs. His gastrointestinal tract began to slow off. His white blood cell count plummeted to 0.
On the 9th day, surrounded by his grieving parents who had been flown in from Winnipeg, Louis Slotin succumbed to
The 7 other men in the room survived, though many suffered from lifelong health complications, including vision loss and increased cancer risks.
The incident sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The cowboy era of nuclear physics was over.
But what of the demon core itself? After the death of Slotin, the core was no longer viewed as a scientific...
It was highly radioactive and poisoned by the very experiments that had killed 2 men.
Plans to use it in the Operation Crossroads nuclear tests at Bikini Atoll were hastily canceled.
The military and the scientists. The military and the scientists had seen enough with it.
Eventually, in the summer of 1946, it was sent back to the Hanford site to be melted down.
The 6.2 kilograms of plutonium gallium alloy were recycled, its atoms mixed into other cores for the growing American...
The physical sphere was gone, but the legend of the demon core remained. It served as the catalyst for the development of remote-controlled assembly systems and the strict safety protocols that govern nuclear research to this day.
The dragon was no longer tickled by hand. It was locked behind lead glass and manipulated by robotic arms.
The deaths of Harry Daghlian and Louis Slotin were the final casualties of the Manhattan Project's experimental